welcome back. And Katie, thank you for joining us again for our third and last installment of this series on evaluating and moving forward. So just as a recap, in our first session, Dr. Tim O'Malley talked about key takeaways from the new directory for catechesis. In our last session, Katie kind of led us through a guided reflection on what are things we should be considering. And we sent out the document that was there that she had shared. And now we had also shared a new document, so we're just going to put it in the chat below, a follow-up, kind of a document to help you form your catechetical action plan. And this is what Katie is going to focus on today. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Katie.
Thank you, David. All right, I'm going to share my screen with you all. Wonderful. Well, thanks for coming back, for joining us for our third and final webinar together. I know you have lots more planned for this summer, so it's not your last webinar for this summer. But so to begin, whoops, let me click the next slide. I thought that we would again begin with prayer. As a little inspiration for our prayer this afternoon, I thought I would draw on St. Philip Neri, since today is his feast day. St. Philip Neri once said, "Cast yourself into the arms of God and be very sure that if he wants anything of you, he will fit you for the work and give you strength." As we embark on this journey to evaluate our programs, to create a plan for how we will help move them forward to better serve God and God's kingdom, we ask for wisdom, we ask for strength, and we ask for all that we need to complete this work. We ask all these things through Christ our Lord. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Oops. All right, so my first question for you all is, as you are doing this work of evaluating, of assessing, of kind of taking a look at your programs, if you've had a chance to do this, I don't want to assume that you haven't had other things to do this week, but if you have, if you had a chance to do this, I invite you, if you're comfortable, unmuting yourself and share a little bit about what you found. That may mean some of the particulars of what you found, or it may be like, what was this experience like? Were there kind of things that you noticed as you were doing this work of evaluating your program? So if there's anyone who wants to unmute themselves and share a little bit about what they found, I very much welcome that.
I'll share.
Please.
I'm Nate. As I was thinking about youth ministry and the different middle school, confirmation, high school programs we do, we just kind of take who comes from the church when we offer registrations or this or that, and don't do a great job reaching further and making an effort to really draw in people who are maybe a little less disinterested or a little more disinterested. And we don't really have an opportunity to reach new families, new young people. So we don't really have any entry points. So those are two places that I think we need some growth.
Thanks, Nate. No, that's so helpful. I think we get so focused on, well, I have to do this thing, and these are the people who are showing up, and we forget that we're responsible for, all the souls in our area, not just the ones who are showing up and coming through our doors. So thanks for noticing that, and then kind of figuring out, and we'll talk a little bit more about that today, of like, okay, now what? How do we attend to this? How do we kind of set a reasonable goal to respond to that need? Others?
I'll go.
Yeah.
We had a conversation this week about kind of getting out of our lanes. My young adults used to do something called Feed the Homeless once a month, all year long. And then our older people, our more veteran parishioners, would donate food to a food pantry, but they could never get it there. So we're talking about little things like getting our young adults to pick that up and get it delivered. So doing away with sitting there and making a sandwich, but still getting, kind of like intermingling a little more of what's happening.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that's, you know, you mentioned young adults. So I'm going to jump on a little soapbox of mine. I feel like young adult ministry ought to be about getting the young adults involved in the parish, not being, you know, this sort of silo of young adults who happen to participate in, you know, in this church. So I love that ministries don't need to be our own, we don't need to be in our own silos, that, yeah, we can interact. We ought to be interacting. There should be that sort of dynamic movement of parishioners between different ministries. So yeah, I really appreciate that, Renee. Thanks. Anyone else? Great. Well, thanks for sharing those comments, and we'll I look forward to hearing more as you continue in this work. One thing that I wanted to mention that I forgot to include in your evaluation, so do this as it's helpful. This may be something that'll be helpful to kind of work into the things that you're doing in this coming year. But looking at, like, what is our desired outcome for our participants? And so this ought to be, you could do this for an individual, any individual gathering that you have. But I think as a ministry too. So if you think about your religious education program, or your like youth ministry. Okay, if a student is participating in this program for this year or for the course of years that they would be in this program, what's the outcome? I mean, you know, teachers think about these things as they're writing lesson plans. They, you know, will write out, or at least be able to articulate, students will be able to, what are the things that we hope the students, the parishioners, whoever, will be able to do when they come out of this session, when they graduate, you know, quote unquote graduate, it's not really a real thing, but, you know, when they complete this program. So that's just something I wanted to name because I didn't include it last time. I find it really helpful when I'm planning workshops and sessions, as I'm thinking about, again, what's the outcome? Like for this session, I hope that you will all be able to write a really helpful goal. I hope that you will be able to articulate your own philosophy of faith formation. I'll get you to that. I'll tell you the other things too. But, you know, I have to think about these things. And then that helps me think about how I'm structuring our time. So, you know, when I work with the ECHO students, there are times that I don't specifically think about the outcome. And I think that the workshops I plan are better when I do think about that. Sometimes it's just implicit, but other times I'm like, wait, where am I going with this? Why are we even doing this? What do I want them to be able to do by the end of this? So it's in some ways related to the mission or goal of the event or ministry or program. And in other ways, it's a little bit more precise because it often is more related to a specific session. So just wanted to share that in case that's helpful. All right, so one of the things that I had asked you to do was kind of identify like the one thing. What's the one thing in what you've evaluated? And again, it can be more than one thing, but what is it that you want to work on? Another, part of the work that you did was evaluating your programs based on some kind of frameworks or benchmarks related to evangelization and catechesis. Some other, in case you're having, I'll name this in case it's helpful if you're having a hard time thinking of like, I don't know, what's the thing I want to do. Another place to look are some of the church documents. I have two of them in front of me. We have Renewing the Vision for Youth Ministry, Sons and Daughters of the Light for Young Adult Ministry, Our Hearts Were Burning Within Us for Adult Faith Formation. I realized there isn't a booklet or like a document for children's faith formation. So that was just, I guess, like the whole directory for catechesis is supposed to be focused on that. I don't know. So side note. But one of the things that is in each of these documents are specific goals related to whatever ministry the document is referring to. And actually in youth, Renewing the Vision for Youth Ministry, there are also 8, I forget what they're called. let's see if we can find it. Themes, components of a comprehensive youth ministry. And so, these are other ways to look at, does my ministry do these things? If I am doing youth ministry, am I, engaging my students in the ministry of advocacy? Am I engaging them in the ministry of pastoral care? Again, like just kind of some other things to think about. So I share these just in case they're helpful. All of these documents are available. You can Google them. There are PDFs on the USCCB's website. You can also get a printout of it. But again, in case it's helpful, these are just the goals of these ministries as named by the USCCB, in case that's helpful for the work that you're doing. So I'm kind of flipping through these quickly, but. All right, so the one thing what I would like to do, and I didn't prep David for this, but I would like to send you into small groups to talk with one another, to share with one another what is the one thing that you're thinking about, or perhaps if you haven't yet identified that one thing or the few things that you hope to focus on, that you may be able to do that in conversation with one another, that your colleagues in faith formation might be able to help you identify, okay, well, I noticed these things as I was evaluating my ministries. What do I do about it? So in just a moment, David will invite you to join a random small group, and we'll leave you in there for a few minutes to discuss, what is the one thing or the few things that I hope to accomplish with my ministries in this coming year. All right, everybody is making their way back in. Again, I'm curious to hear what maybe some of the fruits were of your conversations with one another. You would certainly be very welcome to share the specifics of your conversation, or if it's, as simple as, kind of a more general sharing of what you gained from your small group conversation with one another, and maybe it was totally off topic. You get to be human and you're colleagues with one another and you have things to talk about. So I'm curious about that too. But you are welcome once again to unmute yourself if you'd like and share whatever fruit you gained from this conversation with one another.
Well, the topic in our group was because the need for adult education, not just the kids, and even with my dealing with the parents and now having to educate them because they are the domestic church. That's what my focus is to keep, because that's what we started this year. Very steep uphill battle, but I have to say there were a lot of young parents, especially, who were able to get the grasp of it and were starting to realize that how important that is. So I know it's going to be a gradual thing, as the kids get older. And we had the benefit of face-to-face parent meetings, really. So the technology was the big cross to bear. I hate to say it, but we're going to do the best that we can. And if I can avoid some of that, some of those problems, I will. That's part of my planning for this year, as well as sneaking in some more times for them to come for special things. If it's not every week, it might be once a month or once a unit or something like that. And then the other thing that I want to add, after listening last week to Benny, actually, she's light years ahead of most of us. And I'm glad, because I can see where I'm going down the road, hopefully, that she's focusing on hospitality as people come back. And we need to do that. I mean, people aren't going to know, can I go in this door? Did I have to wear a mask? I mean, Father Mike just put up a YouTube video explaining everything for anyone who wants to listen, but for what we're doing in particular in our group. And I took it and I just sent it right to my parents. I can't hope that they go on YouTube, because that probably isn't the case, and they're probably not going in those places. So I send it to them by email, so they get it from me. And hopefully, and then some people get back, Will, there's some very good, thank you for giving me that information. I really, so that's that was the focus. It was for adult education, and all of this is adult education right now after COVID, I think.
Yeah.
All of it.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that and for your work. Yeah, to do all of this work. We, one of the things that I have found in many years of, my own work in ministry, but also accompanying others who are proposing new ideas, that naming something as a pilot, like we're going to pilot this for this year, it makes it easier for people to kind of get on board. They're like, oh, we're just piloting it. We don't have to commit to this for the next 10 years. So I offer that in case that's helpful with some of the parents to say, we're going to pilot this parent program this year or whatever it is, and then you don't commit yourself to something that maybe didn't turn out how you hoped, but you get to pilot it and you get to evaluate it and adjust it. But yeah, we have to try new things. And I love what you're saying about really building off of what has happened this year. There's been a real emphasis on the domestic church, and let's not let that go to waste. All right, parents, you had to work hard this year. We're going to ease up a little bit, but we're not letting you go completely. So thanks for that. Yeah. Would others like to share what you talked about, what some of the fruits were from your time in small group? All right, well, we can move on to the next thing. So now we're going to talk about our catechetical action plan. So as David has shared in the chat, and maybe you've had a chance to see, I have it printed out in front of me. This is, again, I'm all about creating sort of tools and resources for people to use that can kind of be tailored to your individual needs. I am not sitting here at Notre Dame in my ivory tower telling you exactly what to do. I'm happy to share ideas and resources with you, but I find that tools like this are most helpful. You may disagree with me. I'm open to feedback. So this catechetical action plan, I'm going to walk you through the pieces of it and hopefully help you to see how this can be a useful tool to kind of move things forward, not just this year, but like in a lot of years. You can keep, you can use this for several years in a row. So these are the three pieces of the action plan. The first is a philosophy of faith formation. The second are some specific goals and strategies. And the third is related to accountability. So I'll walk through those. The philosophy of faith formation, again, this is something we have the ECHO students work on every year. Basically, it's looking at like, what is my personal philosophy of how faith formation does or should happen in my particular context. So if I'm a youth minister, I might be writing about faith formation with high school students and their parents and in the youth ministry program. If I oversee lots of things, then maybe I have a broader philosophy of faith formation, or maybe I add to it and I've got different sections. You can go nuts. You could write a book if you wanted to, but that's not what I'm asking you to do. I want you, or what I'm inviting you to do, is to evaluate it and update it annually. ECHO is a 2-year program. So our students write this their first year and then they update it their second year. And I find that oftentimes in the first year, they're a little bit more kind of lofty in the clouds. And after having, most of them, this is their first year working in professional ministry. So after having worked for a year, then they're like, oh yeah, that sounds nice, but that's entirely unrealistic. Or, oh, I forgot about this piece and I ought to add that piece in there. So it's something that I think is worth revisiting. It's not something that you need to entirely rewrite on an annual basis, but it's helpful too to see, oh yeah, I believe that this is how faith formation ought to happen. And that's actually not present in any of the things that I'm doing. So I'm missing something here. In some ways, this is related to a mission, but it's also kind of looking a little bit more at the how. On the handout, there are a list of questions. These are not, you don't need to answer all of these questions specifically. These questions are there to help you kind of brainstorm, for you to spend some time in prayer and reflection to consider these questions to help you formulate your philosophy of faith formation. And as I mentioned, it's a good, as you're evaluating and updating it, we always have to do this work of like, how does the ideal interact with my reality? How does, how I think that this beautifully ought to happen how does that coexist with the reality that people are busy and this isn't their top priority, even though I think it should be, so kind of, we get to do that work of like bringing those two things into conversation with one another. Goals and strategies. We're going to spend a little bit of time on this. So for each of the, again, use this as it's helpful. This is your tool. This is, sort of my recommendation of how to work through the goals, but if, do what you want. I'm not checking. So there are 5 pieces for each goal that I would ask you to include. The first is the goal itself. I'll talk a little bit more about SMART goals and what that means. The second is a standard or competency. With our students, we often use the national certification standards for lay ecclesial ministers. I can send a PDF of that to David that he can share with you all if that's helpful. I think using things like Renewing the Vision or Sons and Daughters of the Light, like those kinds of documents can be helpful, but it's helpful to see that the things that we're aiming for are in line with things that the church says we ought to be aiming for, that we're not just sort of shooting off in our own direction. I've had students use encyclicals. I've had them use scripture as their standards or competencies, and I think that that is perfectly acceptable. But kind of looking for like, where is this rooted in something other than my own idea can be helpful. A rationale, again, this could be, thinking again about the mission that you've articulated. Like, why am I doing this? What is the purpose of this goal? Why does this make sense with the direction our parish is moving, the direction our diocese is moving? Why do we need this thing? The fourth is, I think in some ways, the most important piece are the strategies. All right, how do I break this down? What are the steps that I need to do to complete this goal? And being, again, we'll talk about the SMART acronym, but making sure that these are specific strategies so that it's more helpful to you to kind of help you stay accountable to what you've planned for yourself. And then 2, listing resources. What are the, webinars or books or websites or people that are going to give me, kind of help form me so that I can do this work better. Sometimes it's helpful in the beginning to name some of those things. Like, I want to read this book because that's going to help me to do this better. But we don't always, we think about it and then we get busy, we don't do it. So writing that down here can be helpful. So a good goal, I think, has 2 pieces to it. The first is sort of the mission or vision, and the second is the kind of specific goal itself. So, so the first part asks, like, what's my overall mission or vision or hope related to this goal? And then how will I specifically move forward in accomplishing that? I'll give you an example. To provide a compelling encounter with Jesus Christ for the young adults of the parish by planning and implementing a day retreat for Christ the King's young adult group for spring 2022. So you see that first part, to provide a compelling encounter with Jesus Christ for the young adults, that's sort of the bigger goal, the bigger mission of what I hope to accomplish. And then the very specific piece is I'm going to implement a day-long retreat this spring. Okay. SMART. There's a lot of information on the internet. You could Google SMART goals. I didn't make this up. So I'm not going to go into total detail with this. But these are sort of the 5 ways to check your SMART goal, to make sure that it's a SMART goal and not, a not SMART goal. So the first is specific. Is it a specific goal, or is it like kind of wishy-washy out there? I used to get goals from our students that were like, my goal is communication. I was like, great, what about it? Like, what kind of communication? What are you doing? How are you going to know that you've accomplished this, that you've like gotten better at it? So making sure it's specific, making sure it's measurable. I often will ask my students at the end of the year, how are you going to know whether or not you've accomplished this? So making sure, again, did I, going back to the example that I gave, did I plan the retreat? Did it happen? Yes or no? And sometimes it's, to a degree, I'm going to get 65 students to sign up for blah, 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 Well, I got 55. I was close. Actionable. Is this, I get actionable and realistic kind of mixed up sometimes. But kind of looking at actionable and realistic, like, is this something that's within my power to do? And, realistic, like, does this make sense in, again, especially in their first year, I get students who are like, I'm going to do this thing. And I'm like, no, you're not, but you'll figure it out. So sometimes we have to kind of tone it down and say, oh, that's not realistic for the scope of what I'm thinking of, or, related to the time bound. I'm not going to do that all in 1 year. I get students who are like, I'm going to start a young adult ministry program and we're going to meet 15 times this year. I'm like, why don't you start by the first semester? You can gather some information, get to know the parish. In the second semester, you're going to start meeting with some people. And then by the end of this year, you're going to have a plan for how next year you're going to start this ministry. So the goal is having the plan. The strategies are these things, so kind of breaking it down so that it is actually manageable. Like I have heard you all say, like, yeah, we have to move slowly. And I think that there's some wisdom to that. That doesn't mean we don't change, but sometimes we go step by step. We don't have to, like I've said before, we don't have to like totally blow things up. If you want to, and you have your pastor's permission, by all means, have fun. But, we can look at kind of incremental change and ways that we want to implement some of these things. I had a student of ours who, ended up as the interim director of faith formation. And she said, this isn't the program that I would want if I was the director of faith formation. She got thrown into it, this year in the middle of a pandemic, no big thing. And she found a way to, do things the way that she wanted to, in very, kind of small, reasonable ways. So she focused her attention on the retreat days for the first sacraments, and she gave people a taste of how she would like to do things. So again, be reasonable. You don't have to totally blow up the model, but you can kind of incrementally move in the direction that you hope to move. Accountability. So this is that third piece, because I think we can write goals all day long, but they're not going to do us any good if we're not checking in to make sure that we've actually done some work to accomplish them. So this section will ask you, how will you be held accountable? Write this in. You can consider sharing your goals with your supervisor, or maybe you have a mentor or would like to have a mentor. Now's a good time to get one. To consider, like your supervisor doesn't need to ask you to write goals. You can say, I have written these goals for this year. I would like to share this with you. And I would like to meet in January and May to talk about them. Thanks. So just consider, and maybe it's among one another. Maybe you don't have that kind of relationship with your supervisor, but other colleagues across the diocese who might be good at holding you accountable to say, all right, we're all working on this. Let's write our goals. We can share them with one another, and let's meet together and kind of talk about our progress. When and how will you review your progress? Again, like I said, I recommend meeting at least in the middle of the year and at the end of the year. You could meet more frequently than that. You could meet weekly. You could meet monthly. I think definitely meeting at the end of the year, but I do think meeting in the middle of the year is helpful too, to say, how's this going? What needs to be adjusted? Because there's nothing wrong with saying, oh, I wrote this goal and that is not how this year turned out. So I'm scrapping it and changing it and doing something else, rather than just saying like, I'm not really reaching for anything this year. I gave up. So kind of giving yourself space to, review your goals, check in on your progress with whoever is holding you accountable at some point during the year. And noting too, what additional support you think that you might need to accomplish your goals. I don't know what that is, but I think it's good to name it if you're aware of it. Like I'm going to need, my pastor's approval. So I better work on getting that if I'm going to, implement this program or whatever it is. One thing that I forgot to mention that I did include on the worksheet is that there are two types of goals that I would encourage you to write. The first is really focused on your own professional development, to look at how do I as a professional hope to grow this year? Is it my theological education? Maybe I'm going to take an online class. Maybe I'm going to read a book, participate in a Bible study or a book group. Maybe it's focused on organization. You know, I've really been wanting to figure out this whole calendaring thing. I can't keep everything straight. Maybe I'll, kind of find some resources, get some help with that. Whatever it is, identifying for myself what's something that I want to develop, work on, grow in. The second goal is really what we've been talking about, which is a goal related to a program or ministry or event that you oversee or that you help out with. And that when, you can have more than two goals. So if you have many ministries and you want to have a goal for each ministry, have at it. But also recognize that you are human, and sometimes it's okay to have several ministries that you are maintaining and one or two things that you're kind of working to change. We can't, again, we can't like blow everything up all at the same time. When I'm making changes in one of my program areas, I like to have the other things kind of uneventful. I'm going to run this because I know how to run it, and I'm going to make a change in this area so I can focus my attention and energy on that thing. That's it. That's all I have. So I'm curious, I'm going to stop my screen share, although unless you want to write down our email addresses.
You want comments?
I'm sorry?
Do you want comments?
I would love comments, questions, whatever it is. And I think I'm going to remove the spotlight from myself. I'm going to switch at least my own screen to gallery view so I can see all of your faces. But yeah, questions, comments, thoughts.
You did an outstanding job. Excellent material. I guess my question to David would be, do you present this to each parish or the heads of the, whoever's leading the educational program? Is that available? And does anyone ever check on them to see that, this is done this way or not done this way? And what support can they get? Because I think one of the things that helps education is the atmosphere in which the education is provided, and you can have all of the great material, but the atmosphere that you present. And I have a great book. In fact, I sent it to David this week. It's called A User-Friendly Parish, Becoming a More Welcoming Community. It's a very small book. It's right here. I don't know if you can see it or not, but it is really, really simple, but at the same time, very profound. But again, thank you. You've done I consider an outstanding job. Do you teach? Are you a teacher?
I taught middle school for 3 years, but it's been a while since I taught.
Well, thank you.
No, thank you.
Donald, just to briefly answer your question, one of the things we encourage people to participate in. So we've done these series in May. There's several more in June, so we'll share more information for you. We've offered kind of a monthly ongoing training that's ad hoc. We provide support and resources in as much as parishes choose to use them. There have been some deaneries that we're meeting. We've tried to meet on a bi-monthly basis with deaneries, but again, it's there for those who choose certainly to use it. And we can always improve, right, as a diocese in the ways that we better support those in the parishes. Certainly we're not perfect. And so those who have certain needs that we can improve on, by all means, we're going to continue working on that. But going forward, at least in the immediate level, apart from these trainings in June, is that we are having small group coaching in the summer, where individuals can sign up for a specific content area, and they'll be guided by myself and a mentor DRE in that area. So for instance, there'll be one on young people, there'll be one on family formation, one on adult education, and one on technology integration. So in the short term, that is an opportunity, but it has an end date of just July and August, because we know that things need to change, and also people need to move forward as well. Those are just some of the brief ways. We certainly recognize that there's more ways to help people, but it also helps us to hear from people of what the needs are, so that way we can respond to better serve individuals.
Thank you.
Other thoughts or questions?
I was trying to get myself back over here. I was like walking around my house with my laptop. I think just having these meetings that Dave has set up for us since he took over, because we've been in COVID, I think a lot more of us might be more comfortable kind of reaching out to another DRE or someone. I heard Joanne say something about this. I'm going to reach out to her. I know a couple people have already reached out to me about things, and I know I've reached out to some others, whether it's our Circle of Grace, our safe environment stuff, or how to recruit, or you have a faith formation, you have a family faith formation program. How do you work it? I just think that I feel more connected during COVID than I did before with the other DREs, and having Dave as a resource. I mean, I could email him and we could be on a Zoom, if we needed to, just get on his calendar. He's available, and he's truly trying to help all of us. So I feel like I'm more comfortable knowing I have this resource and other resources than in, a little bit more than in the past. I feel like, oddly enough, I'm more connected or more comfortable contacting somebody, and sometimes just in our little group meetings, it's nice to hear that we're all kind of in the same boat. We're all like, we don't know what to do. Are we going to get catechists, or are we going to have families that come back to church? Like, everybody's kind of in the same boat, so you don't feel like you're isolated on your own little island. And then having these different seminars, you kind of get some things. You're like, oh, that's a good idea. Oh, I'm going to write this down. I'm going to have pages of stuff from the past year that we've done. Just have at this point, I need to 3-hole punch them and put them in a binder. So, I think that all of these have been, very helpful to me personally. That's my 2 cents.
Good. No, thank you so much, Michelle. And yeah, I mean, that's part of it. It's awkward because we're on Zoom, and so this is a little bit more workshop-y, where it's like, talk with your table, you don't have a table, so you get a small group. But that's, I think, so much of the value of things like this is talking with one another. You have the experience, you have the wisdom, and you can learn from one another, and, sort of have your, your laboratory together. You can kind of have the ideas, the things that you're talking about, to identify what are the things that we're seeing, what are the problems, and to put your heads together to say, how do we do this? How do we respond to this? Or who do we call? Who can we talk to? Who can kind of help us think through these things together? So thanks for sharing that, and for all of you for your participation in this, and hopefully the tools that we've offered you kind of give you a space to organize some of these thoughts as you're kind of pulling together these ideas to say, okay, but now what do I do with this? How do I actually put this into action and move forward? Any other thoughts or questions?
I know I have a difficulty with SMART goals. I've heard this in the past, and I read books about it, and then when I go to actually try to write these SMART goals, I really, really struggle in that, as well as mission and vision writing. And I don't know, maybe it's I'm an external processor, so I'm much better doing these things in a group. When I sit down and try and do it myself, I really struggle to figure out a mission that is realistic, or a vision that what's the difference between those things. And then with SMART goals, how do it really quickly becomes idealistic rather than realistic. So any advice in that regard would be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I have a love-hate relationship with SMART goals. I've kind of become known around here as like the SMART goal girl. And I'm like, I hate SMART goals. I hate writing them. They're such a pain in the butt, but they're so helpful. When I look at a goal, when I first start with it, and then after I've spent time tweaking it and kind of fussing with it and making sure it's a SMART goal, then I'm like, oh yeah, this is helpful. I can see this now. So I feel your pain, Nate. But no, I think that, I mean, especially as you said, as an external processor, like finding a conversation partner. All of the students in our program have mentors at their placement. And I think that having that kind of mentor relationship, whether it's, formalized, through your parish or something that you kind of set up, again, like this cohort of people might be a good kind of source for that. But to schedule a meeting with someone to say, I have some ideas, but I'd like to talk this out. Can we schedule a time to do that? And to say like, I want you to push back on me, to say like, okay, but can you be more specific? Or when are you going to have this done? Sometimes it helps to have the outside person who can say, that doesn't make any sense to me. Can you use different words or be a little more specific? So finding someone who, is good at those details, again, whether that's kind of a formal mentor or just somebody who might be helpful, could help you with that. Mission and vision, I'm not great with those either, I'll be honest with you. And that's where I think sometimes using some of like a mission for catechesis. Well, what does the church tell us? I think you said you were doing youth ministry. Like, what does renewing the vision tell me that my mission is for youth ministry? So drawing on resources for some of those things can be helpful. I don't see. Sometimes you just gotta like.
That's good. Thank you.
Yeah, no, and sometimes too with goals, you just gotta do it, and then as you go through the experience of like evaluating the goal to say, oh, I wasn't specific enough because I can't evaluate it now that we're at the end of the year. Like I actually don't know if I made progress. So as I think about writing a new goal for next year, I have to think about how can I make that a little bit more specific. And I think really having those structured times to talk through your progress of your goals helps. I've never been a goal setter. For my job now, I'm required to write goals, and I have a conversation with my boss in the middle of the year and at the end of the year, and sometimes periodically throughout the year. So it's a built-in part of my job, and I have to do it. And I find it very helpful to not just kind of like keep coasting through. So thanks for that, Nate.
Yeah, I would also add to that, the way Katie has set things up, I really appreciate, because it really starts with goals are going to be really hard to set if you don't have your philosophy first. And the hard part of all of this, I found when I was in parish ministry, was when you sit down to plan, like this takes time. You do need to set aside time, just do that, to research and to sit down and to plan. The hard part is when you're in a parish position and you're going, to do that almost feels like you're cheating. Like, you mean I'm going to sit down and just like read up on things? Like that's not what the work I'm supposed to do. And the reality is it is. It's just that it usually never comes to our forefront. That's why we try to at least carve out times for you in times like this or in the coaching groups in the summer. For young people in particular, probably for the coaching group on young people, the book that we're going to ask people to use is called Sticky Faith Innovation. It just recently came out. It's part of the Sticky Faith line by Stephen Argue and Caleb Ruse. And they basically cover what have they learned in innovation and youth ministry over the past couple of years, and where can we move forward in that? How do we pivot? Things of that nature. So we'll look at that. But it starts with a strong sense of like, if you're a teacher, right? If you ever taught, you start with, where do I want my students to be at the end of the year? Okay, now how do I get there? So I would say the same thing. If you're having a struggle with your philosophy or your mission, just simply look like, all right, by June 2022, where do I want the young people in my program to be? What would I want them to look like, so to speak? Okay, what are the skill sets they need to have to get there? And I would emphasize skill sets. It's one thing to sample to know your prayers. It's another thing to have a prayer life. What skill sets might they need to know to get there? Okay, now how do I impart those skill sets? And that's where things become actionable. Okay, well, maybe they first do need to know their prayers. Okay, but then how do I get them to actually start praying? So maybe they need to have a prayer experience. Okay, but if a second they go home and they don't pray with their parents, it's all going to fall. All right, so now I need to bring the parents into this. And maybe this prayer experience will have parent involved. You see what I'm saying? So it evolves as you start looking at what is it going to take to get there? What are going to be the potential obstacles, and how can I start addressing them and making it actionable, that you'll start to realize that a program, an event, a retreat will start to form, and it will be working towards that goal.
No, thanks for that, David. And, one of the things that we as a staff do and that we ask our students to do each year, well, for our students, it's a personal retreat day. For our staff, we have what we call our staff development days, but really it's a couple of days that we do in August that are kind of professional retreat days for us. We spend time doing a little bit of professional development and also looking at our goals for the year, taking time to work on our goals. I've also seen people do this on an individual level. I think you could probably ask your pastor. I would hope that any pastor would say yes to a request like this, to say, I would like to make a professional retreat during a work day. I will not be in the office. I will be at a retreat center, at a park, wherever it is. And I'm going to be praying for my ministry. And I'm going to be kind of doing some strategic planning for our year. Like, get out of the office, spend some time in prayer, and focus on what it is that you hope to do this year. I think that is not unreasonable. And as David said, like, it feels, additional to, like, oh, I don't have time for that. But it's so essential to doing our work well. Wonderful. Well, I am so happy to, continue talking. If anybody has other thoughts or questions, I did share mine and Tim's. Tim is in DC this week for, I forget something. So he was not able to join us this afternoon, but, we are happy to be conversation partners. And I'll say too, we're very open to hearing from you all. What's helpful, maybe what's not super helpful or could be explained better. We've had a couple other dioceses actually hear about this and ask us to repeat it. So if there's anything that's not helpful, let us know and we'll correct it. So we're very much open to your feedback. And, part of the way that the McGrath Institute works is that we share resources, but we also listen to and learn from your experiences. That's part of the work that we do. So if it would ever be helpful to talk through any of this in more detail, Nate, if I can help you write some SMART goals, I'm your girl. So let us know how we can help you as you're doing this work. It helps us to learn from your experience, but we're also to share from what we've learned from the many people around the country that we work with.
David, could you review the cohort sessions and what they will be geared towards a little bit?
Sure. So let me I'm
thinking I may have signed up for the wrong one for what my primary goal is. So
you're totally fine. I'm just going to share my screen real quick. Here we go. So if you go to our website, fallriverfaithformation.org/forward-together, it's kind of your one-stop shopping. So not only will you see the planning guide, again, we point again there, but it does speak to mission and vision. What's the difference between the two? It does speak to not SMART goals, but a sense of how can you set goals. So that might be helpful. This is where you can also register for the other upcoming sessions. So if you're interested in young people, there's a series just with Ablaze Ministries. They're a national organization on youth ministry. As well as Team RCIA, and the larger for the more parish life in general, the Rebuilt Summit that they're doing for our diocese on June 9th. So we certainly encourage all of you to sign up for these. Again, they are all free, sponsored by the Diocese of Fall River. This is where you can learn more about the summer cohorts on the same page. You can click here to sign up. They're free. We're trying to keep them small on purpose. So RSVPing ahead of time allows us to make sure we can do that or plan ahead for that. But they will focus mainly on 4 areas: family formation, youth formation, adult formation, and technology integration. So again, on this one page, you can find all 3 of these pronged resources to there. And we have not yet set the schedule for those cohorts, mainly because we want to set them on the schedule of those who sign up for it. So we would hate to sign up for the 3 that happen to do it, be like, I can't do it Tuesday night. Okay, that's fine. We'll just do it for you. So there'll be a little bit of planning with it. Also, Michelle had mentioned, in the comments, we've shared this, but attached is a link to my own calendar. So we are here, Katie's there, but part of the reason why we exist as a diocesan office is to help you and to learn how to better help you if we're not helping you or failing to help you. So part of that is you can set time to meet with me personally, either via Zoom or in person, given your comfort level. We have car, will travel, have computer, will Zoom, so that we can help you in those ministries. For instance, what does that look like? We've been doing pastoral visits. We've been sitting down with pastor and DREs at the table. So if you have a hard time getting your pastor to sit down with you, we can help that. Or maybe you have a wonderful relationship with your pastor, and it's just simply a matter of fleshing out how some things work together. We're helping one parish in particular put together a planning team to reevaluate what their faith formation will look like going forward. So there are definitely different ways that we can service you. And in the planning guide, there's a list of ways that we can service you as well, whether it's helping you put on a retreat, find speakers, resources, etc. So by all means, we'll send this up in a follow-up email to all of you along with this recording, but know that we do exist as that resource for you. All right, well, we are over time. Certainly, I will stay behind if anyone has any questions, but thank you so much for all of you for joining in and for those who were able to join in the past 3 weeks. And we look forward to seeing you at our June series together.